Keanu Reeves was strolling through a quiet corner of Seattle, soaking in the crisp November air, when something caught his eye. A small table stood on the sidewalk, adorned with a crooked, hand-painted sign that read, "Lavender Treats, $1 for a sweet moment." Behind it was a 13-year-old boy, Liam Carter, with tousled hair and a hesitant grin, offering his little creations to the occasional passerby. Intrigued, Keanu wandered over with a warm smile, handing over $1 for a tiny lavender cookie. As he took a bite, he saw it in Liam's eyes, a flicker of hope tangled with a deep, quiet sorrow. This wasn't just a kid selling treats. The reason behind it hid a story that would tug at Keanu's heart and set off a chain of events he never expected. Before we dive into this tale, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. If you love heartfelt stories like this, hit that subscribe button for more inspiring moments just for you. Keanu paused, the cookie still in his hand, and crouched down to Liam's level. "Hey kid," he said, his voice soft but curious. "These are pretty good. You make them yourself?" Liam nodded shyly, fidgeting with the edge of his worn jacket. "Yeah, me and my mom. She likes lavender, so I thought maybe people would too." Keanu's smile widened. He could tell there was more to this than just a kid hustling for pocket money. "What's your name?" he asked, leaning in slightly. "Liam," the boy replied, glancing up briefly before dropping his gaze again. "Liam Carter." Keanu took another bite, savoring the faint floral taste, and decided to dig a little deeper. "So, Liam, what's the plan with the money? Video games? New sneakers?" He kept his tone light, but his eyes were sharp, watching for the boy's reaction. Liam hesitated, then shook his head. "It's for my mom," he said quietly. She works a lot, and I want to get her something nice. A silver necklace she saw once. She never buys stuff for herself." Keanu's expression softened. He knew that look, the one kids get when they're carrying a weight too big for their years. He'd seen it before, in his own life, growing up with a mom who'd sacrificed everything for him and his sister. "Sounds like she's pretty special," Keanu said, standing up but keeping his focus on Liam. "Where'd she see this necklace?" Liam pointed down the street. "There's a little shop a few blocks over. She stopped to look at it one day when we were walking home from the bus stop. It's simple, just a thin chain with a little pendant, but she smiled at it like it was the best thing ever." Keanu nodded, already piecing things together. "How much you need for it?" he asked casually, brushing crumbs off his hands. Liam swallowed hard. "It was $20 when I started saving. I've been picking up cans and doing odd jobs for 8 months. Got $21 now, but..." He trailed off, his voice cracking. "I checked yesterday. It's 28 now cause of the holidays." Keanu felt a pang in his chest. He could hear the desperation in Liam's voice, the kind that comes from wanting to do right by someone you love and hitting a wall you can't climb. 8 months, huh?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "That's some serious dedication." Liam shrugged, but his shoulders slumped. "Doesn't matter if I can't get it. She deserves it, you know? She's been cleaning at the hospital all day and selling stuff at night just to keep us going since my dad left when I was 3. I just wanted her to have something nice for once." Keanu didn't say anything for a moment, just watched Liam as the boy kicked at a pebble on the ground. He knew that story too well. Single moms grinding through life, invisible to most of the world. His own mother, Patricia, had been that way, working late nights to make ends meet. He glanced down the street toward the shop Liam had mentioned, then back at the boy. "What's her name?" he asked gently. "Sarah," Liam said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah Carter?" "Sarah Carter," Keanu repeated, like he was committing it to memory. "Well, Liam, I think Sarah's lucky to have a kid like you." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a worn leather wallet, and fished out a $20 bill. "Tell you what," he said, holding it out. "Let's get that necklace today. My treat." Liam's eyes widened, and he shook his head fast. "No, I can't take that. I was going to earn it." Keanu chuckled, a low, warm sound. "You've earned it already, trust me. 8 months of hustle? That's more than most people do in a lifetime. Let me help you finish the job." Liam stared at the bill, then at Keanu, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find the words. Finally, he mumbled, "Thank you," his voice thick with emotion. Keanu waved it off, but his mind was already moving. He'd walked over here on a whim, just looking for a quiet moment away from the noise of his own life. But now he was in it, hooked by this kid's heart and the story behind those lavender treats. "Come on," he said, nodding toward the shop. "Let's go see about that necklace." As they started walking, Keanu kept Liam talking. "So, your mom's working 2 jobs. That's tough." Liam nodded, clutching his little money tin. "Yeah. She's always tired, but she never complains. We live in this rundown place out by the edge of town. People don't care much about folks like us there." Keanu's jaw tightened slightly. He'd seen that kind of neglect before. Communities left to fend for themselves while the world moved on. "Sounds like she's a fighter," he said, keeping his tone steady. "What's she like when she's not working?" Liam's face lit up a little. "She's funny. Makes me laugh even when stuff's bad. And she loves lavender. Says it reminds her of dreams she used to have." Keanu filed that away, his steps quickening as they neared the shop. When they got there, Liam pushed open the door and Keanu followed, his eyes scanning the small space until they landed on a display case. There it was, a delicate silver necklace, simple but elegant, glinting under the lights. Liam pointed. "That's it." Keanu stepped up to the counter, Liam at his side, and signaled the clerk. "How much for that one?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The clerk, a tired-looking woman with gray streaks in her hair, glanced over. $28, she said, then looked at Liam with a flicker of pity. "Price went up last week." Liam's face fell, and he started counting out his crumpled bills and coins, his hands shaking. Keanu watched him for a second, then put a hand on his shoulder. "Hold up," he said, pulling out his wallet again. This wasn't just about the necklace anymore. Something about Liam, about Sarah, had gotten under his skin, and he wasn't walking away yet. Keanu stood at the counter, watching Liam fumble with his pile of coins and crumpled bills, the boy's small hands trembling as he tried to make the numbers work. $21 spread out in front of him, a testament to 8 months of grit, but still $7 short. The clerk shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between Liam and the necklace in the case. "I'm sorry, kid," she said, her voice low, almost apologetic. "That's the price now." Liam's shoulders slumped and he started scooping the money back into his tin, his head bowed, like he'd just lost something bigger than a sale. Keanu felt it hit him, a quiet ache that reminded him of too many moments he'd seen growing up. He was about to step in when Liam turned to leave, the defeat in his steps louder than words. That's when Keanu moved. He pushed off the counter, his old jacket rustling as he closed the gap between them. "Hey, Liam, hold on a sec," he called, his voice steady but warm. Liam froze, glancing back, his eyes wide with surprise. Keanu crouched down, meeting him at eye level, the brim of his worn baseball cap casting a shadow over his face. It was the kind of look Keanu carried in real life, unassuming, scruffy, but with a kindness that cut through the noise. "What's that you're trying to buy?" he asked, nodding toward the case. Liam hesitated, then pointed at the silver necklace. "It's for my mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She saw it a while back. I've been saving, but it's more now." Keanu's gaze softened. He straightened up, pulling out his wallet again, and handed the clerk a crisp $50 bill. "Ring it up," he said simply, then glanced at her with a small grin, "and give the kid the change, all right?" The clerk blinked, her mouth dropping open for a second before she nodded and started bagging the necklace. Liam stared, his tin still clutched tight. "Wait, you don't have to," he started, but Keanu held up a hand, cutting him off gently. "I want to," he said. "You've done the hard part already. Let me get you across the finish line." Liam's lip quivered and he managed a shaky thank you, his eyes glistening with something he was too proud to let spill over. Keanu handed him the little bag with the necklace, but he wasn't done yet. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms, and looked at Liam with that quiet intensity people loved about him. "Tell me about your mom," he said. "What's she like?" Liam relaxed a little, clutching the bag like it was a lifeline. "Her name's Sarah," he said. She's the best. Works all the time, cleaning at the hospital, selling stuff at night. She loves lavender, though. Says it's her favorite smell. She used to dream about being a baker, but she had me and, well, she couldn't." His voice broke on that last part, guilt creeping in. Keanu nodded. his face unreadable for a moment, but inside something clicked. He knew that sacrifice his own mom, Patricia Taylor, had poured her life into raising him and his sister, working late hours, skipping dreams to keep them fed. "Lavender, huh?" Keanu said, a spark lighting in his eyes. He glanced around the shop, spotting a small rack of dried lavender bundles near the door. "What if we add something to that necklace? Make it extra special for her?" Liam's brow furrowed, confused, but Keanu was already moving. He grabbed a bundle, the faint purple catching the light, and tossed it to the clerk. "Add this, too," he said, sliding another few bucks across the counter. Turning back to Liam, he smiled. "She'll love it, trust me." Liam's face lit up, a real smile breaking through for the first time, and Keanu felt that ache in his chest shift into something warmer. But then the room changed. People in the shop started to notice him, whispers rippling through the small crowd. A couple of well-dressed customers near the back muttered, their voices sharp enough to carry. "Kid looks like he crawled out of a dumpster," one said, sneering at Liam's patched jacket. "What's he even doing here?" another added, adjusting her expensive scarf. Keanu's jaw tightened, but he didn't turn. He'd heard that kind of talk his whole life, people quick to judge, blind to the fight behind someone's story. It stung more knowing it was aimed at Liam, a kid who'd spent months scraping by for his mom, while they probably spent that much on coffee in a day. He crouched again, ignoring the stares, and focused on Liam. "Don't listen to them," he said, his voice low but firm. "You're doing something real here, something they wouldn't understand." Liam nodded, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the crowd. Keanu straightened, brushing it off, and decided to push deeper. "You said she wanted to be a baker. What happened?" Liam swallowed, his grip tightening on the bag. "She was going to go to school for it, but then my dad left when I was 3. She had to take care of me instead. Works herself to death now, but she never says it's hard. I hear her cry sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep." That hit Keanu like a punch. He thought of his own mom, the nights she'd hidden her struggles so he wouldn't worry. "I get it," he said quietly, almost to himself. "My mom was like that too. Worked herself raw so me and my sister could have a shot. People like your mom, they're the real deal, Liam." He paused, then added, "She's why I'm here with you right now. I've got a soft spot for moms who fight like that." Liam looked up at him, eyes wide, like he couldn't believe someone like Keanu Reeves could understand his little world. Keanu clapped a hand on Liam's shoulder, the decision settling in his gut. "Let's make sure Sarah knows how much she means to you," he said, his voice carrying a weight that promised more than just a necklace and some lavender. "You good with me sticking around a little longer?" Liam nodded fast, a mix of awe and hope lighting his face. Keanu grinned, that familiar half-smile fans adored. But inside, his mind was racing. He'd walked into this shop on a whim, but now he was tangled up in something bigger, something that felt personal. He didn't know where it'd lead, but he wasn't letting go yet. Wow, that was intense, right? If your heart's racing like ours, don't miss out. Subscribe now. We've got more stories of grit and grace coming tomorrow. Hit that button and stay with us. Keanu stood with Liam in the small shop, the bag with the necklace and lavender bundle clutched tight in the boy's hands, when the door chimed behind them. A woman stepped in, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, dressed in a simple blazer that didn't quite match the casual vibe of her jeans. She scanned the room, her gaze landing on Keanu. "Mr. Reeves," she said, her tone firm but polite, "can I have a word?" Keanu turned, his brow furrowing slightly. He didn't recognize her, but something in her voice told him this wasn't a fan asking for a selfie. He glanced at Liam, who was still staring at the bag like it was a miracle, and gave him a quick nod. "Hang tight, okay? I'll be right back." He stepped aside with the woman, Emily Stone. She introduced herself in a hushed tone and listened as she spoke fast, her words clipped but urgent. "I've been trying to track you down," she said. "I work with a local outreach program. Saw you with the kid outside earlier. We've got resources, could help him and his mom if you're serious about this." Keanu's eyes narrowed, processing her offer. He wasn't one for bureaucracy, but her mention of Sarah and Liam struck a chord. He gave a small nod, his mind already turning. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's figure something out." Emily handed him a card, then stepped back, leaving him standing there lost in thought. When Keanu turned back to Liam, the boy was watching him, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Keanu crouched down again, his voice low and steady. "Hey Liam, how about I get you home? I've got an idea, something bigger for your mom. You up for it?" Liam's jaw dropped slightly, but he nodded fast, trust blooming in his expression. Keanu grinned, that easy half-smile that hid a world of intent, and led the way out of the shop. Outside, he waved off the small crowd that had started to gather, people whispering his name, phones half-raised, and headed for a beat-up sedan parked a block away. No sleek SUV, just a practical old car that matched the man he was off-screen. They climbed in, Liam clutching his bag in the passenger seat, and Keanu pulled onto the road, the hum of the engine filling the silence. As they drove through Seattle's rougher edges, streets lined with faded signs and cracked pavement, Liam started pointing things out. "See that corner?" he said, his voice small but sharp. "Kids hang out there because they've got nowhere else. And over there? Guy's been sleeping on that bench for weeks. Nobody does anything." Keanu's hands tightened on the wheel, his jaw set. He'd seen it all before. Cities turning blind eyes to the people who needed them most. "That's not right," he said, his tone low, almost to himself. "People shouldn't be left like that." Liam glanced at him, surprised by the edge in his voice, then kept going. "Mom says it's just how it is. She works so hard, but we're still stuck. Some nights I hear her crying when she thinks I'm asleep. She doesn't know I know. She'd hate it if she did." He paused, his fingers tracing the edge of the bag. "She always says I'm all she needs, but I see how tired she is. I just want her to be happy, you know?" Keanu's chest tightened, the words cutting deep. He thought of his own mom, Patricia, hiding her exhaustion behind smiles, pretending everything was fine so he wouldn't worry. "Yeah," he said softly, "I know." The car slowed as they passed a tiny bakery, its window glowing faintly in the dusk. Keanu's eyes caught a sign, "Lavender Pastries, $3." And he hit the brakes, pulling over without a word. "Wait here," he told Liam, stepping out before the boy could ask. Minutes later he was back, holding a small box with a single lavender cake inside, its scent drifting through the car as he handed it to Liam. "For your mom," he said, his voice rough with something unspoken. "She deserves to dream again." Liam stared at the box, then up at Keanu, his eyes welling up. He tried to blink the tears away, but one slipped down his cheek and he swiped at it fast. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice breaking. "You don't even know us." Keanu leaned back in the driver's seat, staring out the windshield for a long moment. "I don't have to know you," he said finally. "I see you fighting for her and I see her fighting for you. That's enough. People like your mom, people like my mom, they're the ones who keep the world going and they get nothing for it. If I can change that, even a little, I'm in." Liam sniffled, clutching the box tighter, and Keanu reached over, ruffling his hair. "You're a good kid, Liam. Don't ever forget that." The rest of the drive was quiet, the weight of their words settling between them. When they pulled up to Liam's run-down apartment building, peeling paint, a busted streetlight flickering overhead, Keanu cut the engine and turned to him. "Listen," he said, his tone serious now. "I'm coming back tomorrow. Don't tell your mom yet. Let's make it a surprise, all right?" Liam's eyes widened, a mix of shock and excitement flashing across his face. "Really?" he whispered. Keanu nodded, his gaze steady. "Really? We're not done here." He stepped out, walking Liam to the chipped front door, and handed him the bag with the necklace and lavender, the cake box tucked under the boy's arm. "Tell her you had a good day," Keanu said, crouching one last time. "And get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be big." Liam nodded, his face glowing with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "Thanks, Keanu," he said, the name sounding strange and reverent on his tongue. Keanu just smiled, standing up and stepping back. "See you soon, kid." As Liam disappeared inside, Keanu lingered for a moment, staring at the building. He thought about Sarah, 36, 2 jobs, a dream buried under years of survival, and felt that familiar pull in his gut. He'd come out here for a quiet walk, but now he was knee-deep in a story that mirrored his own in ways he couldn't ignore. Emily's card burned a hole in his pocket, and his mind raced with possibilities. He didn't know Sarah Carter yet, but he knew her kind, the silent warriors society overlooked. Tomorrow he'd change the game for her, and for Liam. He turned back to his car, the cold biting at his hands, but inside he was warm with resolve. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Keanu woke early, the Seattle cold seeping through his jacket as he stepped out of his modest hotel room. His mind hadn't stopped turning since he'd left Liam's doorstep the night before. Sarah's story, Liam's quiet strength, the unfairness of it all gnawing at him. He'd made a call to Emily Stone after midnight, her outreach program card still in his hand, and by dawn, they'd hashed out a plan. Now, as he climbed into his old sedan, a large envelope and a small gift box sat on the passenger seat beside him. He drove back to Liam's rundown apartment building, the weight of what he was about to do settling in his chest like a promise he couldn't break. Emily met him outside, her sharp eyes softened by the morning light. She carried a bundle of dried lavender, the scent faint but unmistakable, and gave him a quick nod. "You sure about this?" she asked, her voice low. Keanu didn't hesitate. "Yeah," he said, his tone firm. "They deserve it." Together, they climbed the chipped steps to Liam's door, and Keanu knocked. Inside, he heard footsteps. Then the door creaked open. Sarah Carter stood there, 36 years old, but looking older, her dark hair pulled back, exhaustion etched into the lines around her eyes. She froze when she saw him, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered, recognizing Keanu Reeves instantly. "Morning, Sarah," Keanu said, his voice warm and steady, that half-smile breaking through. "Mind if we come in?" She blinked, too stunned to speak, then stepped aside, her gaze darting between him and Emily. Liam appeared behind her, his face lighting up when he saw Keanu. "You came back," he said, his voice a mix of awe and relief. Keanu chuckled, stepping inside the cramped apartment, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. "Told you I would," he said, ruffling Liam's hair before turning to Sarah. She was still staring, her hands trembling slightly as she closed the door. Keanu didn't waste time. He held out the lavender bundle first, the purple sprigs catching her eye. "Liam said you loved this stuff," he said simply. Sarah took it, her fingers brushing the dried flowers, and a small, shaky smile broke through. "I do," she whispered, her voice thick. "Thank you." Then he handed her the small box, the lavender cake from the night before. "And this," he added, "figured it'd go with the vibe." She opened it, the soft scent rising, and her eyes welled up. "How? How did you know?" she asked, looking at Liam, who just grinned. But Keanu wasn't done. He pulled the large envelope from under his arm and held it out, his expression shifting to something more serious. "This is the real reason I'm here," he said. Sarah took it, her hands shaking now, and opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, a full scholarship to a local vocational baking program, already filled out in her name, along with a note promising to cover tools, ingredients, and 6 months of rent so she could drop one of her jobs. Her breath caught, and she looked up at Keanu, tears spilling over. What is this?" she stammered. "It's a chance," Keanu said, his voice low but steady. "Liam told me you wanted to be a baker once. I figured it's time you got to try." Sarah's legs buckled slightly and she sank onto a worn chair, clutching the papers. She turned to Liam, pulling him into a tight hug, and sobbed, raw, wrenching sounds that filled the tiny room. "All these years," she said between gasps, "I gave it up for him, worked myself sick so he'd have a roof, food. I never thought I'd get this back." Liam hugged her back, his own eyes red. "I just wanted you to be happy, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "That's all I ever wanted." Keanu watched them, his throat tight. He crouched down beside Sarah, meeting her gaze. "He's been fighting for you," he said softly. "I'm just helping him out a little. You raised a hell of a kid." Sarah laughed through her tears, wiping her face with her sleeve. "I don't even know what to say," she whispered. "Why would you do this for us?" Keanu leaned back slightly, his hands resting on his knees. "Because I see you," he said. "Society forgets people like you, working 2 jobs, taking the hits, keeping it together for him. I've seen it before. My mom did it too. You're not invisible to me." Sarah's tears slowed, and she looked at him, really looked, like his words had cracked something open inside her. "People don't care about folks like me," she said, her voice raw. I've been cleaning floors, selling junk, getting sneered at for years. Once I applied for a grant to go to school, got turned down because I didn't know the right people. They said I wasn't worthy. Her lip trembled, but she straightened up, clutching the envelope. And now this? I don't know how to believe it. Believe it, Keanu said, his tone unwavering. You're worthy, Sarah. The world needs people like you, people who care, who fight. Let this be your shot. She nodded, tears brimming again, and Liam squeezed her hand, beaming. Emily stepped forward then, setting a small thermos of tea on the table. Thought we could sit a minute, she said, her voice gentle. Sarah laughed, a small shaky sound, and poured cups with unsteady hands, the warmth spreading through the room. They sat together, Keanu, Sarah, Liam, and Emily, around a scratch kitchen table, sipping tea in a space that felt too small for the moment unfolding. Sarah opened up, talking about the years of scraping by, the nights she'd stayed up worrying about bills, the dreams she'd buried. Keanu listened, nodding, asking quiet questions that drew her out. You've got a gift, he told her after a while. His voice calm but certain. Liam sees it, I see it, now you've got to see it too, Sarah smiled, tentative but real, and looked at her son. I'll try, she said. For him. When Keanu stood to leave, the air felt lighter, charged with something new. He turned to Sarah at the door, his hand on the knob. You're gonna do great, he said. Just keep going. Then to Liam, with a grin, take care of her, all right? She's one of the good ones. Liam nodded, chest puffed out, and Sarah stepped forward, hugging Keanu impulsively. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick. For everything. He hugged her back, brief but firm, then stepped out with Emily, leaving a family transformed. As he walked to his car, Keanu felt the weight lift, not gone, but shared. He'd given Sarah a spark, a chance to rise, and it felt right. The cold bit at his hands, but inside he was steady, knowing he'd be back to see how far that spark could carry her. Keanu's visit left a mark that didn't fade. The next day, Sarah sat at her scratched kitchen table, the scholarship papers spread out in front of her, her hands still trembling as she read them over and over. Liam hovered nearby, watching her with a mix of pride and nervousness. You're gonna do it, right, Mom? He asked, his voice soft but insistent. Sarah looked up, her eyes glistening, and nodded. Yeah, she said, a small, determined smile breaking through. I'm gonna try. That was the start. A spark Keanu had lit, one she couldn't let die. Within a week, she'd enrolled in the baking program, her heart pounding as she signed the forms. It wasn't easy. Quitting her night job meant leaner days, and the classes piled onto her hospital shifts left her bone-tired. But Liam was there, every step, bringing her coffee, quizzing her on recipes, telling her she could do it when doubt crept in. Those months were a blur of flour-dusted hands and late nights. Sarah stumbled sometimes, burned batches, missed buses, moments where she stared at her textbooks and wondered if she was too old, too worn out to chase a dream. But then she'd see Liam's face, hear Keanu's voice in her head, "You're worthy, Sarah," and push on. Liam, now 14, grew taller, his voice cracking as he cheered her through it. He'd sit with her at that same table, helping her practice piping techniques, laughing when frosting ended up on his nose. "You're going to be the best baker ever," he'd say, and she'd hug him tight, feeling the strength he'd always seen in her. A year later, in November 2025, Sarah stood in a cap and gown at the vocational school's small graduation, Liam clapping loudest from the front row. She'd done it, earned her certificate, her hands steady now as she gripped it. But she didn't stop there. With the last of Keanu's rent support and a loan she'd scraped together, she leased a tiny storefront in their neglected corner of Seattle, a place where the streets were rough, the people tougher, and hope had long been a stranger. She painted the sign herself, Lavender Dreams, the letters uneven but proud. Inside, she set up a counter, a few mismatched tables and an oven that hummed with possibility. On opening day, Liam helped her hang a little shelf, and there, front and center, she placed the silver necklace he'd given her, a quiet, shining reminder of where this all began. The TM wasn't just hers. Sarah hired 2 other single moms, Maria, who'd lost her job at a factory, and Jen, whose landlord kept hiking the rent, giving them a chance like Keanu had given her. They baked together, their laughter mixing with the scent of lavender and sugar, turning that little shop into a haven. Word spread fast. People came for the pastries but stayed for the warmth. The way Sarah listened when they talked about their own struggles. Lavender Dreams became a beacon in a neighborhood the city had forgotten, where kids like Liam once roamed, aimless, and men slept on benches. Sarah fought for it, pushing back against snide comments from richer folks who'd drive by and scoff. Who'd buy cakes from a place like this? She proved them wrong, one scone, one smile at a time. Every holiday season, Sarah would set that necklace on the counter, its silver catching the light, and tell her customers the story. "My boy wanted me to have something nice," she'd say, her voice soft but steady. And then this man, Keanu Reeves, walked in and changed everything, gave me a shot I didn't think I'd ever get. People would lean in, eyes wide, some tearing up as she talked about Liam's hustle, Keanu's kindness, the way it all snowballed into this. Liam, wiping down tables or boxing orders, would blush but grin, proud to hear it again. The story wasn't just theirs anymore. It was a thread that wove through the community, stitching hope into places it had been torn away. One crisp November morning, a year after the shop opened, Liam found a letter in the mail. No return address, just a simple envelope with Sarah's name scrawled across it. He handed it to her, curious, and she opened it with flowery hands. Inside was a single page, handwritten in a familiar slanted script. "Sarah, I heard about Lavender Dreams, knew you'd make it happen. You're doing more than you know. Keep going. Keanu." Sarah pressed the paper to her chest, tears streaking down her cheeks, and Liam hugged her, his own eyes misty. "He was right about you," he said, his voice thick. She laughed, shaky but full, and nodded. "Maybe he was right about us both." That letter stayed on the counter too, framed beside the necklace, a quiet testament to the man who'd seen them when no one else did. Sarah kept baking, her hands stronger now, her dreams no longer buried. The shop grew, slowly, steadily, hiring another mom, then a kid from the streets who needed a start. It wasn't just about cakes, it was about fighting the indifference that had choked their neighborhood for years. Sarah faced down the skeptics, the landlords who sneered, the system that wrote off people like her. And she won. Not with anger, but with every tray she pulled from the oven, every job she offered, every customer she welcomed. The story ended on a snowy night, late November 2025. Sarah and Liam stood outside Lavender Dreams, the shop's lights glowing behind them, snowflakes drifting down to dust their coats. She wrapped an arm around him, taller now than she'd ever imagined he'd get so fast, and they watched the flakes settle on the cracked sidewalk. "We made it, huh?" she said, her voice soft, almost disbelieving. Liam nodded, leaning into her. "Yeah, Mom, because of you and him." She smiled, her eyes tracing the snow, feeling the weight of the past lift like it never had before. In that moment, they weren't just a single mom and her kids surviving. They were a family remade, standing on a foundation of trust and kindness that stretched back to a cold day when a stranger stopped to listen. Keanu's gift hadn't just been a scholarship or a cake. It was a belief that rippled out, touching lives he'd never see. Sarah squeezed Liam's shoulder, the necklace glinting inside through the window, and whispered, "We're okay now." The snow fell silent around them, but inside they were warm, alive with the power of what faith and one good heart could do. What strikes me most about this story is how one act of kindness, like Keanu's, can ripple out and rewrite lives. It's a reminder that we all have power to lift someone up, even in small ways. But it also begs the question, why does it take a celebrity to make us notice people like Sarah? Society often overlooks the quiet fighters, and while Keanu's heart shines here, I wonder if we'd care as much without his name attached. What do you think? Does it matter who helps, or just that it happens? I'd love to hear your take in the comments. Huge thanks for sticking with this journey. Your support keeps these stories alive. If they move you, hit that like button, share with a friend, and subscribe for more. Where are you watching from? Let's keep the conversation going.